Electric vehicles have made huge progress in the last couple of years, but there's been a major problem, and I think it might have just been fixed. Tesla filed for their North American charge standard to be open sourced and available to anyone to license. And now we're starting to see the first dominoes fall. First, it was Ford in May that announced that they're going to start shipping cars with the NACS adapter the next couple of years, and they're going to have access, thanks to Tesla, to the Supercharger network. And now in June 2023, GM is on board. You might not realize it, but what Tesla announced with the North American charge standard and with the news of late, how more companies are picking this over the CCS standard, it's going to be one of the biggest game changers in electric vehicles. And I know it's not that glamorous to talk about charging adapters, but standardization and what this is going to do to the entire industry is going to be breathtaking. And I don't think you probably fully realize just how much of a difference it's going to make. So to go from J1772 CCS over to Tesla's adapter is going to be an absolute game changer. And today, let's talk about charging and the future electric cars and why this is so important. I'm Ricky, and this is 2-Bit Da Vinci. So let's talk about how we got here. It actually started with Aptera all the way back several years ago that made a petition to get the entire US government and other car companies to use Tesla's standard. And of course, Tesla standardized their NACS standard, which is just a Tesla port, but now open sourced and available for anyone to use. And then in May 2023, Ford announced that they would be partnering with Tesla to have access to the Supercharger network, and that future Ford cars will ship with this very adapter for all their charging needs. And cars that have already been sold with CCS will get an adapter to have access to the Superchargers. And now General Motors recently, just in the last couple of days, is following suit and doing the same thing. But before we talk about how important this is going to be for the entire industry, all chargers, all car makers, let's talk a little bit about the importance of standards. Anybody who has an iPad or a laptop or a smartphone, you know how important USB has been. Now, whether it's been USB-A or C, they're backwards compatible. And USB kind of changed the game. And USB-C in particular has been one of the most ubiquitous and most successful charging standards of all time. Now, of course, the one device that doesn't use USB is my iPhone, which still has the Lightning cable. Now, Lightning was amazing compared to the 24-pin connector that came before it. It was reversible and compact, but it never became a standard. Instead, we got to USB-C, which is actually similarly elegant, reversible, but actually better because it has higher data throughput and better charge speed. So this is actually the analogy that I was thinking. When the first Tesla chargers came out with this adapter, I thought this is going to be great. And I think in the future, we'll see something like this, but probably different, because who's going to get it right the first time? But Tesla actually nailed it all the way back in 2012. This design has not really changed, and it is still in use to this day. It is very rare that companies nail something so complicated so early on. Normally, you'll see things like Lightning, where it was like, all right, step in the right direction, but we need more changes before it can actually take off as a standard. So we have two companies really in particular to thank, which would be Tesla and Aptera. Tesla, obviously, for open sourcing the standard and allowing others to use it, but also Aptera for having that petition, which over 40,000 people signed. Interestingly, in the case of Aptera, their very early prototypes came with the Tesla adapter, which made people think, do they have access to Tesla Supercharger network? What do they know that we don't? But it turned out they just wanted this elegant cable from the very beginning. And part of the reason why is on the Aptera EV, the charge port is behind the rear license plate. And the Aptera has like a motorcycle size license plate. And the odds are a traditional CCS adapter just would not work. So before we talk about why this cable is so genius and why everyone should use it, let's compare the standards and see how we got here and what countries and what parts of the world use which standard. As I mentioned, over on the right is J1772. And if you're thinking, yeah, sure, the Tesla cable is a little bit thinner, a little more elegant, but it's not that big of a difference. This is an AC cable, meaning that this is for when you plug into your house, either 120 or 240 volt, but not for DC fast charging. This does both. In fact, in order to get both AC and DC fast charging from this port, as we mentioned, you have the J1772 up on top, but you also have this goofy 2-pin DC charging cable on the bottom. This results in a really thick and cumbersome cable that's much, much more difficult to use compared to this. We'll get back to the genius of this here again in a minute. Okay, so in the US, we have CCS1, as I mentioned, the combined charging standard 1, and also Tesla's NACS. In Europe, we have CCS2, the combined charging standard type 2. And as you can tell, plug is a little bit different, but the basic anatomy is the same. You have this top flat off section here for AC charging. And over here on the right, you have the control pins for the data transfer, and then the big DC pins for DC fast charging. But the port overall is that size. In China, we have the GBT standard. And here we have 20234-2 and -3. One is for AC, and again, one is for DC. And what does that look like? Well, here is the port for each type. This is the .2 standard for AC, again, kind of a flat top, and you've got your pins for alternating current. And then below we have the .3 standard, which is for DC fast charging. Again, it has that kind of flat off area to make it easier to plug in, but you have your DC plugs, control systems, and grounding. But this is what it looks like in China. Interestingly, in Japan, we have another standard called CHAdeMO. And what's actually kind of fun about this is in Japanese, it actually comes from a term for how about a cup of tea, which is the idea of how long it would take to charge your car. I like that part, but the charger itself, not so much. Now, here's a look at what that looks like. And what's interesting is the CHAdeMO standard gives you the charging for DC fast charging. But it actually isn't so simple because as you can see in this picture of a Nissan Leaf, you have this, again, hodgepodge of too many ports. This would be your DC fast charging section, and this is your home charging section. And that is what the charge port on a Nissan electric Leaf would look like. Not exactly ideal. Now, one thing you probably noticed that all those adapters had in common is you have different pins for AC and different pins for DC. And the reason why is because when you plug in something like a 1772, you're engaging these alternating current pins. And the way that this works is that when you plug this into the wall, AC from your house comes in through this and it goes into the rectifying circuit of the car. Now the rectifying circuit takes it back to DC and then feeds that DC into the battery pack. Now this is why home charging is limited typically to around 10 kilowatts because that's how massive the rectifying circuit in each car is. You're actually using the car's onboard rectifier to take it from AC to DC. In comparison, when you plug into a DC fast charger, you are bypassing the internals of the car and taking DC from the charging station straight to the battery pack. That's why you normally have two pins. So then how does Tesla do it? How can Tesla seemingly do the impossible like no one else can and send AC or DC through? Well, it's actually just some clever engineering. Tesla's philosophy is simplicity. So just from this one cable, you can have AC or DC. And the way they do it is with some extra circuit and logic on board. First, let's talk about what happens when you plug in at home over like an AC system, right? This would be the L1, L2. First, you would have the charge from your house go through the onboard charger and then onto the battery. The positive side is a very similar thing, comes through and goes like this. In contrast, when you're DC fast charging, you could actually close these gates and have the DC come straight through to the car pack. And that's fundamentally what's happening here. Tesla's adapter has extra hardware to detect if it's AC or DC coming in. And if it's AC, it'll route it through the charge controller on board, rectify it, and then to the pack. And if it's direct current already, it just goes straight on through. So that's kind of the technical reason for why this is good. But really, it comes down to much more. As I mentioned, there's a couple other components too. First is ease of use. This cable is an absolute pleasure to use. If you've ever charged your car with a cup of coffee in your hand or something, this is incredibly easy to manipulate. Just line up and plug in. With this, it's actually much harder to line up because as you can imagine with the DC pins hanging out the bottom, you have to line it up quite this way as well. Now, if it's cold out, this gets more difficult to twist. The cabling is not so easy. It's a little bit tougher. And as a result, it's just that much more tough to manage. In my experience, I often have to use two hands to plug this cable in, whereas with this, I don't. The second is safety. Here, to keep this from falling out, they have a mechanical latch right out here. But the problem is being on the handle, if a user at a public station drops it and this part breaks off, which I've seen, I have actually been at Electrify America stations where that has happened. If this were to break off, you could be DC fast charging, 400 volt, 800 volt, something like that to your car, and you could just pull this back out. If that happened, it could arc, it could electrocute you, it could catch fire, it could be all sorts of dangerous. And that's what I hate about this cable. This is seemingly okay, but drop it the right way over and over, and it could break. Tesla has none of that, as you can notice. And the reason why is this right here is their latch. But the part that actually latches is on the car side. So the car detects this, brings in the latch, and holds it in place. As a result, this is just a lot lighter, a lot less likely to get damaged if you dropped it at a charging station. And the only real button is up here. It's kind of a software button. This triggers the car's door to open and you just plug it right in. In comparison, on a CCS car, you have a door for the charge door, and then you have a separate cover for the DC pins, which you don't have to open if you're just AC charging at home. But the minute you're DC charging, you have to open the door, drop that door, and then plug the whole thing in. None of this makes any sense, and you can solve all of that with this. Now, some of you are going to say, oh, CCS is a standard and it's just fine. There's no world where the CCS plug is better than this. This is vastly superior. These are the early days of EVs, and we can choose the right one. We don't have to be stuck with a bad standard. I've heard everyone, including Tesla, should move to CCS. That would be horrible. If I had to stick that in my car, I would enjoy it less. There's just no way around it. Better, safer, easier to use, easier to plug in, one-hand operation. Just win, win, win all around. Now, there's actually other benefits to standardizing too. We can finally standardize where the charge ports are located on these cars. If you've driven EVs, they're all over the place. Some are in the front, some are in the back, on the left, on the right. If you're gonna place them wherever you want, imagine the drama and struggle it would be for a charging infrastructure company to figure out where to put chargers at stations. It's very difficult. With Tesla, it's really standardized. The charge door is always the back left of the car, at least here in North America. It's right here near the taillight in the back, and that's where the chargers are. This means you back up into your parking spot and plug it in on the left side. If you could follow that standard, you just imagine how much easier it would be to roll out new chargers. You don't have to have 35 feet of cabling and everything else. Now, to be fair, I do wish Tesla's cables were a little bit longer. I mean, there's going to be a Cybertruck or some other vehicle that just needs a little bit more cable run. And it's really, really stingy how long that cable is. Obviously, shorter cables have advantages like less heat losses and safety and stuff, but I do wish they were a little bit longer. But I think if everybody went NACS, we could also agree to put the door in the same place. Every car would work the same way. There are cars like the Ford F-150 Lightning that have to take up 2 stalls at a supercharger station because of how the doors are and how the charging ports are located. Even if they had a magic dock, which I think we can get rid of now. We don't need them anymore because if everyone goes to NACS, there's no need for Tesla to build adapters on their end of it. And then there's the entire life cycle of a charge session. Unlike gasoline that was really dumb and simple, you just put your gas hose in, start filling up your car, and when it fills up, it'll trigger a little thing and you pull it out and you're on your way. In an EV, when you plug into a charger, the car announces to the charger what it is, what it expects, its pack voltage, and kind of what it operates under. The EV continues to tell the station about its level of state of charge and tells it what it expects in terms of current. Every car will have a different charging curve. So maybe at 65%, it only wants this much charge. And as it keeps filling up, it wants less and less. It is the responsibility of the car to keep the station apprised on what it's looking for as it fills up. And the station also has to tell the car about how much grid availability there is, or maybe the charging cable has gotten too hot and it needs to cool off and lower the charge speed and all that other stuff. There's so many variables. On a really, really hot summer day, it can get pretty hot. And the handle too, and there's sensors all along all of this stuff. Newer cables are liquid cooled. There's all kinds of tech that goes into it. But this is a complicated interaction. And part of the problem is some of these companies use different vendors for various parts. Maybe the inverter and the rectifier is some company that provides that, the battery management system or this or that. It's not as vertically integrated as what Tesla does. There's a couple of reasons why Tesla's systems work so well. One, complete vertical integration. They build all of the software, all the modules, all the stuff themselves, and they build the chargers. And that way, Tesla's a bit like Apple. I've always made that analogy. They make everything, and it's impossible to compete with that. And two is Tesla's software is just second to none. And I think by forcing people to go NACS and tying into Tesla Supercharger networks and following their APIs and their software methodology, it'll force all of the companies to do a better job of handling this. And I do think charging for all companies is about to get better. So what does this mean for EA and other public charging networks? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, really great sub-vendor companies like ABB have announced that they will provide NACS adapters and plugs on all the new charging stations that they sell going forward. This means that if you're EA and you're building another EA charging system, you could buy ABB's chargers. By the way, they're known to be way more reliable than the Signet chargers and other things that EA has messed with in the past. But you can buy an ABB charger that has a new NACS plug on it. Now, what you do with the old chargers that have CCS? I'm not exactly sure. But one thing is interesting is these EA stations don't get used very much. And that's because there aren't that many non-Teslas out there. And if now you can charge on Tesla's networks, they're probably going to get even less use, I would imagine. So they definitely have to win on user experience, and they have so much else to do. So in this interim stage, companies like EA can sell adapters to let people with NACS vehicles charge at their old-fashioned CCS networks, and then make sure to make the switch to NACS going forward for all the vehicles and charging systems in the future. But in all reality, this is going to be a major kick in the pants for EA to upgrade and get their act a little bit together. If you've ever noticed, EA chargers run on a special build of Windows called Windows Embedded Edition. And this is absolutely insane. That is not what you want to do. Honestly, page one rewrite, get rid of all of that, run sort of a custom Linux distro, and get a crack-notch team of software engineers to make sure that it works, because crashes, I've seen the blue screen of death, Windows splash screens. It's absolutely insane how far behind they are and how much work they need to do on the software side. We also need auto plug and charge. Since Tesla Superchargers don't have any kind of screens, you have to have all that figured out on the app and back end. So every car is on Tesla's database. It says I'm a Ford F-150, cool. Here's my VIN, and I'm all set up. Here's my account information. The payment gateway is all set up. I plug in and I charge because there are no screens. There's nothing else. You just plug in and walk away. And if you're forced to follow that and you comply with Tesla's API rules and fall in line, I think the charging experience is going to be so much better for everybody else. So what does it mean for car makers then? Well, the dominoes have started to fall. That's what every headline says. And the analogy is perfect, because all you need is literally one domino to start a chain reaction. And that's where the expression comes from. And that's what we're seeing. First, it was Ford. Well, Aptera, right? Then it was Ford in May saying, look, we're having a little bit of a demand problem with our Mach-E's. Our F-150 Lightnings are not selling as well as they could. We got to do this. Because if I was buying a Ford Lightning, my first question would be, how am I going to charge it on the road? Because I had a Ford Lightning. I went out to Arizona to pick up my solar panels, and I had nothing but disaster and drama at every charging stop I made with EA. Then came GM, and now GM is also on board. They have access to Tesla's Supercharger network, and their future EVs in the future, I mean, they don't really make any right now. They make like 10 Hummers a year or something, and like basically nothing. But their future EVs can roll with NACS. Both companies have their challenges, right? GM, I think, is really lost. I feel like they're just a rudderless ship. Let's build a Bolt 2 not on the new architecture and then cancel it, not make them. It's just a weird situation, but at least they figured this out. And similarly for Ford, yes, the F-150 is a great truck and the Mach-E is a great vehicle, but they aren't investing enough in platform architecture, I don't think. Compare that to like MEB or the eGMP platforms by VW or Hyundai, Kia, respectively. Those platforms have shown you a wide variety of cars that are possible, and they're able to bring them out very quickly. And that's the platform. GM has Ultium, and they have invested in that. Ford really hasn't. But this is definitely a good move. Now, what I would like to see next is Volkswagen, because I actually got a chance to go out to Huntington Beach, Surf City, California, and see the ID Buzz long wheelbase. And that thing is absolutely fantastic. I love it. I have never been in any vehicle where in the first, second, and third row, there is so much room. You could have an entire football team, basketball team, and they would fit so well. I would love one of those cars. But if I don't see VW join this agreement and go NACS and have access to the Supercharger network, it's a non-starter for me. If you're asking me, would I trade my Model Y, which I can drive anywhere without even worrying about anything, all day, every day, or take a ID Buzz and deal with Electrify America, that's a non-starter. And as amazing as your car is, it wouldn't matter, because if I can't charge it, it's not a good road tripping car. Now, if you're going to buy a Buzz and drive it around town and charge it home, it's fine. You'll be okay. But if you have plans to drive long distances, and I think anybody who drives a Buzz probably will, you're going to want to see them be next in line. And I really do hope they figure that out, because the software stuff is always where VW has struggled. Topic for another day. Let me know if you want me to talk about some of these other topics that I could talk about. But the big thing here is we're going to see standardization. And standardization is what made the internet possible. Imagine if when you went to www.nba.com, it was a different site or a different address, a different convention. It didn't work the right way. It didn't render in your browser. The internet would not work. And we have seen standardization completely across the board when it comes to software. And that's why software works so well. and the internet works so well. The NACS, North American Charging Standard, might get people in Europe kind of thinking, what gives? Why is it North American? Well, the EU has really strict guidelines. I don't see them changing from CCS Type 2 anytime soon. I think you're stuck with that, in my opinion, an inferior charging cable. But I don't see them making this switch. Write to your Congress people and people in the EU, write to whoever's in charge of the standards bodies and request a similar change. But the cool thing is, unlike the internet, which has to work no matter what country you're in, charging a car, really, you're not going to leave North America. When will you take your car outside of North America? It's not going to be a problem. So if Japanese cars or European cars have a different adapter than the cars that you have here in the US, or, that's okay. We don't have to have one standard to rule them all, but we do need to have one standard for all car companies. If we're going to compete with gasoline cars, and we are now in a new era where EVs are not some small thing, they are the best-selling cars. The best-selling car in 2023 of any variety, for the first time, is not a Toyota Corolla, which it almost always is. It's a Tesla Model Y so far this year, 2023. We are living in unprecedented times. The EV revolution is kind of here. It's happening. And we cannot make the mistake of living with a inferior standard like CCS. And more companies, if you're building cars and you don't have NACS and you don't have supercharger network access, who's going to buy your cars? It will not make any sense to. It won't make any difference how amazing the Ioniq 5, for example, in my opinion, one of the best EVs in the world you can buy. It won't make any sense to buy it if I could have a Model Y and have access to the supercharger network. So I'm hoping VW's next, and then it'll be Hyundai, Kia, the Japanese. Who knows what the Japanese are doing? But everyone probably should follow suit. Finally, I'll leave you with one last thought. What if you're a Tesla owner? Should you be angry now? You're not going to have as many stalls because other people's EVs that they didn't buy a Tesla, now they can use your parking spots to charge their cars. I don't think you have anything to worry about. First of all, this gives Tesla access as a public charging provider to all kinds of new money from the government as part of the IRA and other infrastructure bills, and they will build new chargers. New Tesla Superchargers in California are coming with 20 to 30 to 40, 50 stalls. And next door, you see like 4 from EA, and no one's using any of them. But Tesla will be motivated and incentivized to continue to build out more charging networks. And the other good news is non-Tesla EVs are just minuscule today. There just aren't very many. Ford and GM, there aren't many cars that they're selling today. So the immediate impact, pretty minimal. And the long-term impact, Tesla now becomes an infrastructure company. The company that knows what they're doing the best, builds the best stuff, the best software, the best integration. They, who also have an interest in actually doing this right, can build chargers and make money. And by the way, I think Tesla cars will charge for cheaper, right? I think the average Tesla, let's say, is 30 cents per kilowatt hour, and maybe the Fords and GMs are charged 40 cents. So you'll pay a little bit of a premium, and that premium goes straight in Tesla's pocket. That would be my probably take. And I'm not sure if GM and Ford are paying them like a monthly subscription fee, if you will, to have this access. But either way, if Ford or GM want any shot to sell electric vehicles, this is definitely the right move. And hopefully this kind of gives you a rundown of what we're looking like and why I think this might be one of the most important moments in electric vehicle history. We've proven car companies can make good EVs. The Tesla Model Y is the best-selling car in the world of any kind. Insane, absolutely amazing. Now what we need is standardization on the charging port and charging networks and infrastructure, locations, and all the rest. And I think it's coming. And if you think that's amazing, you got to watch this video next.